Rich, lights and lasers are all the rage. In fact, pretty much everyone who makes a handgun is now making one with an accessory rail that takes a light or a laser. This is a Springfield Armory XDM 3.8, and this is a Streamlight TLR 7, which is just a white light weapon light. And it works very well, as you can see.
Definitely. I have a Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 compact, and I have a TLR 8, which has a laser option. So I could go just light, just that, or I can move it to just laser, and the laser helps with more precise aiming. Or what I would prefer was to have both the light and the laser. And that gives you not only the ability to see your target, but also to have that dot for easy aiming.
Right, well, people might wonder, why would I need one or the other? And the purpose of a light is to see what you can't see. Traditionally, people say that you need a light that's at least 100 lumens brightness to be able to see what's in someone's hand. Luckily, I mean, both of these are 500 lumens. That's pretty damn bright.
When you start getting a light that is that bright, not only are you able to see the threat, but you're interfering with the threat's ability to see you, which is always a good thing.
All right, now that's got a laser. Let's talk about lasers.
Yeah, lasers, there's green, there's red, and what a laser does is it simplifies the aiming process because you don't have to transition between front and rear sight. You just shoot where the dot is. But it doesn't help you to identify a threat. And with lasers, there's green, there's red. They'll all work well in a low light environment. Green is a little easier to see during daylight conditions.
But it burns up batteries quicker.
It does, and it costs more.
Well, let's actually talk about the disadvantage of a weapon-mounted light. Anytime you're pointing a flashlight that's attached to a gun to find out what you're looking at, guess what? You're pointing a loaded weapon at that. So perhaps you need to think about a separate flashlight. This is a Streamlight ProTac 2LX, and it's got steady on, or we've got the strobe function, which a lot of lights do, and that's specifically designed to disorient the target. Maybe when we come back, we can actually talk about using these and what it looks like from the bad guy's perspective. Rich, I know you could probably teach a 2-day or even a 2-week course on lighting techniques, but let's just go over just a few of the basic ones right here.
Obviously, we're not going to want to linger in the doorway. We're going to do that now just to make some points, but we would want to be behind cover as much as possible. But if I'm coming up here and I have my weapon-mounted light laser, I'm searching this room and there's my threat. I was able to neutralize it.
Yes, however, with a weapon-mounted light, you see what you did there. You're pointing your loaded gun at some non-hostiles, at some innocent bystanders.
And that is always a concern, which is why you got to make sure your finger's straight and not on the trigger until you've identified a threat. The same could be said, Jim, even if you're using a handheld light, if you're using a technique like the Harry's, where your light is connected to your gun.
Right, well, and you know, you're going to be using a flashlight indoors. Okay, so you always have to be aware of the things going on. And there are, I guess, what I would consider 3 basic handheld flashlight techniques. I actually like the Harry's, which is, you know, you're wrapping around and you've got the flashlight hand locked into the shooting hand. And I like that because it supports your shooting hand.
Sure.
But that's, you know, you've got to do a little bit to get into it.
It takes a little practice.
And then there's the other one where, you know, you've just got it up here. You could even call it like a neck index. Sure. And it's you almost work like a turret. You know, the flashlight is going where you're looking, and then you can shoot. And then the third one is the flashlight's up here some way.
Kind of a modified FBI.
Yeah, and now people like this because, hey, the light's nowhere near you, so if they're shooting at the light, they're gonna miss you. But the problem is, you know, say I've got the light up here, well, guess what? It's shining on the door frame. It's not on the target anymore. So you have to be aware of that, especially when you're in close confines. And, you know, you can move it around if you need to, or even right out here, but it works as long as...
That's why it's good to know more than one technique, because your environment may dictate what's the most appropriate technique. Now, Jim, with a handheld light, you have an option of shining it in the assailant's face as opposed to just on the chest. Like here, wherever I'm pointing my muzzle is where the light is.
Right, well, and see, that's the thing. The flashlight is not a laser beam. You know, if you're shining it, you know, the threats are, hands are the threat, right? What's in the hand? What's in the hand? You're shining it down at the waistline, but you know what? If you shine it in their face, you can still see the waistline and they're blinded. And then especially if you want to go with the strobe, and that's completely disorienting.
It sure is, Jim. Now, one of the things you have to keep in mind is you have to know your equipment, and don't have your thumb here along the frame. Have your thumb resting on the activation switch so you're not having to hunt for it when you really need it.
Well, and that's what we should talk about when we come back, is practicing with your equipment, whether it's a handheld light or a weapon light or a combination light and laser. Practice is something that you need to do with it. Rich, I know what a lot of people in the audience are thinking. They're thinking, hey, I'm not an idiot. I know how to work a flashlight. You hit the button, it turns on. You let go of the button, it turns off. And hey, a laser, you put it on the bad guy. But especially when you're talking about introducing guns to the mix, it's not that simple.
No, nothing ever is. And have they practice accessing that light, because it's not going to automatically be in their hand when they need it.
Right, right. You know, where are you keeping the flashlight, and, you know, trying to remember where you put it when things go bump in the night.
And choosing the right flashlight. That flashlight has a high output immediately.
That's it. You got to look at the equipment that's available on the market. I personally prefer, like my way of thinking is, heck, if I need a flashlight, I want it to be on the brightest setting possible. Now this isn't really programmable, but some are, and you can program it to be either low output, high output, whatever, the first time you hit the button.
Sure, and when you have something like this weapon mounted light laser, you want to make sure that you don't just put it on and figure, you know what, the laser will be right where it needs to be. No, you have to zero this thing in, right? You get a rough zero by aligning that laser with the iron sights, but you're going to want to confirm that through live fire and give it a little tweak as necessary. Also, you want to make sure that you have this on the right mode so that when you turn it off and then when you turn it back on, it's going to be just what you want.
There you go. Now, I deliberately have an empty gun. Why? Because my favorite technique is the Harry's technique, which when you get it all set up, it's like this. But you have to get into position like this. You do not want to sweep yourself, and that is really easy to do.
Gun has to go out first when you're doing
Gun has to go
technique.
out first. Yeah, you got that right.
And even on some of the other techniques, it takes practice. You're not going to automatically be able to align. Let's say the FBI technique. You can't necessarily align the light with your gun. It takes practice.
Well, okay, you know, now that you're thinking about that, another one of my favorite techniques is the neck index, where you're sort of like a turret. But the problem is, if you don't practice it enough, you tend to look at your gun, and so you shine your flashlight at the gun, and right now, all I can see is the back of my gun that is brilliantly lit up. I can't see my front sight at all, so you have to set off, offset just a little bit so that you can see your sights and see the target.
And that technique is obviously designed for close quarters, where it's easier to make a one-handed shot, but you need to practice one-handed shooting.
And that's harder than two-handed shooting.
Absolutely,
really
especially
is.
when you're trying to align a light. So practice doesn't just involve physical skills, it involves being familiar with your gear.